She smiled at the rogue wolf standing at the edge of the river, not knowing that the Alpha King was watching from the shadows, and that single smile would change everything. The rogue was barely standing. His fur was matted with blood and mud, one ear torn clean off, ribs visible through his thin coat. He had crawled to the shallow crossing behind the pack kitchens, where Alara came every morning to wash the linens alone. Before the rest of the pack woke, before anyone could see her face and find another reason to hate her. She should have been afraid. Every wolf in the Iron Maw pack knew what happened to Omegas who helped rogues, that the animal was whimpering, dragging a shattered hind leg through the cold water, and Alara had never been able to walk past something in pain, not even when she was in pain herself. She knelt on the frozen bank, the ice cutting through the thin fabric at her knees. Her fingers were already numb. They were always numb these days because the pack house gave her no blankets, and the shed behind the stables where she slept had a hole in the roof that let in the November wind. She tore a strip from the bottom of her dress, the only dress she owned, and wrapped it around the wolf's bleeding leg. "There," she whispered, "you are going to be all right." The rogue wolf looked up at her with yellow, pain-glazed eyes, and Alara smiled at him. It was a real smile, the kind that crinkled the scar that ran from her left temple down across her cheekbone to the corner of her mouth. A gift from her stepmother's silver ring 3 years ago, on the night her father died and left her with nothing but a pack that wished she had died instead. She did not hear the branch crack 50 yards behind her in the tree line. She did not feel the weight of the gaze that locked onto her from the darkness between the pines. She did not know that the most powerful wolf on the continent had just watched her kneel in the ice and give away the last piece of fabric protecting her skin from the cold to save a creature the world had thrown away. And she did not know that his wolf, silent for 3 years since the death of his first mate, had just opened its eyes inside him and spoken a single word he never expected to hear again. Mine. But that was a revelation for later. Right now, Alara had 6 minutes before the head Omega, Marin, would ring the kitchen bell and expect her standing at the washing station with raw hands and dry eyes. If she was late, there would be no food today. There had been no food yesterday either, because she had given her portion to the little girl in the servants' quarters, 9-year-old Nessa, whose mother had been banished from the pack last spring for the crime of asking the beta why Omegas were not allowed to eat until every ranked wolf had finished. Alara pressed her palm flat against the rogue wolf's side. She could feel his heartbeat, thready and fast. She could feel the fever burning under his fur. He needed a healer, medicine, warmth. She had none of these things. "Listen to me," she said softly, leaning close enough that her breath fogged against his muzzle. "There is a cave 1/2 mile downstream, past the fallen oak. The current is slow there. You can make it. Rest inside and I will bring you food tonight." The rogue wolf whimpered again, then licked her wrist once. Alara felt the rough warmth of his tongue on her skin, and something in her chest ached with a loneliness so deep it had no bottom. She stood. She smoothed down what remained of her dress. She picked up the basket of wet linens and balanced it on her hip and walked back toward the pack house with her shoulders straight and her chin level, the same way she had walked every morning for 3 years, as though she was not starving, as though she was not freezing, as though the scar on her face did not burn every time someone stared at it and looked away. The kitchen bell rang. Alara walked faster. Behind her, deep in the tree line, a man stepped out of the shadows. He was tall. He was broad across the shoulders in a way that suggested violence was not a possibility, but a promise. His jaw was hard. His dark hair pushed back from a face that looked as though it had been carved from stone by someone who believed beauty should hurt. His eyes were black, pure black, the kind of black that swallowed light, and right now they were tracking the Omega girl with the scarred face and the torn dress as she disappeared around the corner of the pack house like a ghost slipping back into a world that did not want her. Kale Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Seven Packs, ruler of every territory from the northern ridge to the Ashfall border. He had come to the Iron Maw Pack for a political inspection, a routine visit that happened every 5 years, and he had arrived a day early because his wolf had been restless for weeks, pacing, snarling, clawing at the inside of his mind for reasons Kale could not explain. Now he understood. His wolf was howling. Not the howl of aggression or dominance that Kale used to command armies and destroy rival packs. This was something older, something primal, something that reached into the marrow of his bones and rewired him at a level he could not control. His wolf was howling for the girl who had smiled at a broken thing and given it the only warmth she had. Kale closed his eyes. His hands were shaking. The Alpha King's hands had not shaken since the night his first mate, Sura, had been poisoned by an enemy pack 3 years ago. He had held her in his arms while the venom turned her veins black. He had listened to her last breath leave her body. He had sworn on his own blood that he would never bond again, that his wolf would stay silent, that the part of him capable of love had died with her, and now his wolf was screaming the word mate so loud it rattled his teeth. He opened his eyes. The girl was gone. "Find out who she is," he said. His beta, Ronan, appeared at his side like a shadow. He had been there the whole time, as he always was. The Omega, the one with the scar. Ronan hesitated. That hesitation told Kale everything. His beta knew something already. "Speak." "Her name is Alara Voss, daughter of the former Iron Maw Gamma. He died 3 years ago. The pack records list her as an unranked Omega. She is assigned to the kitchens and the laundry. She has no wolf." Kale turned his head slowly. "No wolf. That is what the records say. She never shifted. The Iron Maw Alpha classified her as defective. She has no mate status, no pack rights, no wolf. A wolf with no wolf? The lowest possible creature in their world. Less than Omega, less than Rogue. Something the pack hierarchy did not even have a name for because it was not supposed to exist. And yet his own wolf, the wolf of the Alpha King, the most dominant animal in 7 territories, was losing its mind over her. "What else?" Kale asked. "She has a scar on her face. From the stepmother, according to the servants. The stepmother is now mated to the Iron Maw Beta. They took everything that belonged to Alara's father. His house, his rank, his money. Alara was moved to the servants' quarters and then to an outbuilding when the stepmother complained about seeing her face at meals. Kale felt something move through him that was not his wolf. It was something colder, something calculated, something that wanted to take the Iron Maw pack apart piece by piece and rebuild it with the girl in the torn dress sitting on a throne at the center. He said nothing. That was the most dangerous version of Kale Blackthorn. Not the one who roared or commanded, the one who went quiet. "The inspection begins tomorrow," Ronan said carefully. "It begins now." Alara did not know that her life was about to crack open. She was standing at the washing station in the kitchen, her hand submerged in water so hot it turned her skin red, scrubbing bloodstains out of hunting leathers that belonged to wolves who would not look at her on the street. Marin, the head Omega, stood behind her with a wooden spoon she used to wrap the knuckles of any Omega who worked too slowly. "The Alpha King arrives tomorrow," Marin said to the room. "Every surface in this house will shine. Every dish will be perfect. Every Omega will be invisible. If any of you embarrass this pack in front of the King's delegation, I will personally see to it that you spend the winter sleeping outside the walls." Alara kept scrubbing. She already slept outside the walls, essentially. The shed was barely inside the perimeter fence. That means you especially, Scarface. A few of the younger Omegas giggled. Alara did not react. She had stopped reacting to that name 2 years ago, the way a person stops flinching from a burn once the nerves are dead. I want you nowhere near the main hall during the welcome feast, Murrin continued, stepping closer. Alara could smell the woman's perfume, something floral and cloying, designed to mask the sour scent of someone who enjoyed cruelty and called it discipline. You will stay in the kitchens. You will not speak. You will not be seen. If the Alpha King lays eyes on you, it reflects on all of us. Alara nodded once. And Alara, she looked up. Marin was holding a small ceramic bowl. Inside it was a thick piece the color of ash. Put this on your scar before the feast. It will not fix your face, but at least you will look less like something dragged in from the forest. Marin set the bowl down on the counter and walked away. Alara looked at the paste. It smelled like lye and animal fat. It would burn on the scar tissue. She knew this because Marin had given her the same paste once before, and Alara had worn the chemical burn for 2 weeks. She picked up the bowl and quietly set it in the waste bin. Then she went back to scrubbing. That evening, after the kitchens closed and the last pot was hung and the last floor was mopped, Alara stole 3 pieces of bread and a half-eaten piece of salted venison from the scrap pile. Stealing was punishable by public caning in the Iron Maw pack, but the scrap pile was destined for the compost, and Alara had decided long ago that feeding a starving animal or a starving child was worth 20 lashes. She tucked the food inside her dress and slipped out through the back gate. The night was brutally cold, the kind of cold that reached into your lungs and froze the moisture there, so every breath felt like swallowing glass. The sky was black and vast and full of stars that did not care about the girl walking alone beneath them. She found the cave downstream, exactly where she had told the rogue wolf it would be. He was there, curled against the back wall, his breathing shallow. The fever was worse. She could feel the heat radiating off him from 3 feet away. She knelt beside him and placed the food near his muzzle. The rogue wolf opened his eyes. He was too weak to eat. Please, Alara whispered. She tore a piece of bread into small bites and held one against his mouth. You have to try. The wolf took the bread from her fingers with a gentleness that broke something inside her. He chewed slowly, painfully, and swallowed. Good, she said. She fed him another piece, and another. The venison he could not manage, so she chewed it herself until it was soft and pressed it to his lips the way she had once seen a mother wolf feed her pups. It was intimate and strange and absolutely natural. She sat with him until the food was gone and his breathing had steadied. She pressed her hand to his side and felt his heartbeat stronger now. Still fast, but no longer fading. I do not have medicine, she told him. But I will come back tomorrow, and the day after. I will come back until you can stand. The rogue wolf shifted his head and rested it on her knee. The weight of it, warm and solid, made Alara's eyes sting. No one had touched her with affection in 3 years. No one had leaned on her, trusted her, needed her. She did not cry. She had not cried since the night her father died. But she was close. I know what it is like, she whispered, stroking the matted fur behind his remaining ear, to be thrown away. She stayed until the cold became dangerous, until her fingers turned white and her teeth chattered so hard she could not speak. Then she tucked the rogue wolf's body against the warmest wall of the cave, covered him with pine branches, and walked back through the frozen forest to her shed. She did not see the massive black wolf standing on the ridge above the cave, watching her with eyes that glowed like burning coals in the darkness. She did not see the way his claws dug into the frozen earth when she shivered. She did not hear the low, tortured sound that came from deep in his chest when she disappeared into the trees. Cale Blackthorn had followed her. Of course he had. His wolf had given him no choice. From the moment he had seen her that morning, his wolf had been in a state of escalating frenzy, pacing and clawing and demanding that he go to her, protect her, mark her, claim her. Cale had fought it all day. He was the Alpha King. He did not chase Omega girls through the woods in the dark like some lovesick pup. But when the sun set and his wolf sensed her leaving the pack house alone in the cold with no protection, something snapped. He had shifted, he had followed, and he had watched. He had watched her kneel in a frozen cave and feed a dying rogue wolf with her own hands. He had watched her chew food for the animal because it was too weak to chew for itself. He had watched her whisper to a creature the world considered worthless the same thing she clearly believed about herself. I know what it is like to be thrown away. Cale's wolf did not howl this time. It made a sound Cale had never heard from it before. A sound like grief, like recognition, like two broken things looking at each other across an impossible distance and understanding. They were made from the same fracture. He shifted back to human form on the ridge, naked in the freezing air, and stood there for a long time. I swore I would never bond again, he said to the empty forest. His voice was rough. He did not recognize it. His wolf said nothing. It did not need to. The bond was already forming. Cale could feel it, a golden thread unspooling from somewhere behind his ribcage, stretching through the darkness toward the girl in the shed. It was warm. It was terrifying. He had not felt warm in 3 years. The next morning, the Iron Maw pack erupted into chaos. The Alpha King had arrived, not tomorrow, as expected. Now, standing in the courtyard in a black coat with his delegation of 12 warriors and his beta flanking him like a wall of muscle and controlled violence, Alpha Kane of the Iron Maw pack was scrambling. He was a thick man with a red face and a temper that ran hot and burned fast. His mate, a sharp-featured woman named Priscilla, stood beside him in a dress that cost more than most Omegas earned in a year. She had been Alara's stepmother for 3 years and had spent every one of those years making sure Alara knew exactly how unwelcome she was in her own father's pack. Alpha King, Kane said, bowing deeply. We were not expecting you until tomorrow. Forgive the state of things. Cale's face was unreadable. The state of things is exactly what I came to see. The welcome feast was moved up by 12 hours. The kitchens exploded into frantic activity. Omegas ran in every direction, carrying platters, polishing silver, arranging flowers. Marin's wooden spoon became a metronome of anxiety, wrapping knuckles and countertops in the backs of heads with mechanical precision. Alara was assigned to the back kitchen, as promised. Out of sight. She was washing root vegetables in a basin of cold water, peeling them with a knife so dull it was more of a scraping tool when the door to the back kitchen opened. You, Scarface. Priscilla stood in the doorway. Alara's stepmother. She was beautiful, objectively beautiful, with dark hair piled high and a gown of deep green that showed off the emerald necklace she wore. The necklace that had belonged to Alara's mother. Alara recognized the stones even after all these years. Her chest tightened. The serving girls are short-handed, Priscilla said, her voice carrying the particular tone she reserved for Alara, the one that sounded bored and disgusted at the same time. You will carry the bread trays during the feast. Marin said I was to stay in the kitchen. Priscilla's eyes narrowed. Marin answers to me. You will carry the bread trays. You will keep your head down, and you will wear this. She tossed a rough sackcloth apron at Alara. It was stained and too large, designed to cover her from neck to knee. I will not have the Alpha King seeing a disfigured Omega and thinking our pack breeds defectives. Elara caught the apron. Her hands were steady. Her face was blank. She had learned to make her face blank the way a soldier learns to breathe through pain. Not because it did not hurt, but because showing it hurt gave the enemy something to aim at. Yes, Priscilla. You will call me Luna. You are not my Luna. The words were out before Elara could stop them. They were quiet, calm, and absolutely devastating. Priscilla's face went white, then red. Her hand moved fast, catching Elara across the cheek with a crack that echoed off the stone walls. Elara did not flinch. The slap landed exactly on her scar, which was always where Priscilla aimed, and the pain was a bright hot line that ran from her temple to her jaw. She tasted copper. You will carry the bread trays, Priscilla said through her teeth, and if you speak to me like that again, I will have Cain throw you out of the pack entirely. And we both know what happens to wolfless Omegas outside the borders. She left. The door slammed. Elara pressed the back of her hand to her bleeding cheek. She stood very still for a long moment. Then she picked up the dull knife and went back to peeling root vegetables. The feast began at sundown. The gray hall of the Iron Maw Pack was a cavernous room with vaulted timber ceilings and long tables arranged in a U shape around a central fire pit. The ranked wolves sat at the head table with Alpha Cain and Priscilla. Warriors and their mates filled the side tables. Omegas served, that was the order of things. Kale Blackthorn sat at the center of the head table in a chair that might as well have been a throne. He had not spoken more than a dozen words since arriving. He did not need to. His presence was a gravitational force that pulled every eye in the room toward him and held it there. Even the most dominant wolves in Iron Maw Pack could not meet his gaze for more than a second or two before looking away. He was watching the room, watching the way the Omegas moved, heads down, shoulders hunched, like prey animals navigating a room full of predators. Watching the way the ranked wolves ignored them entirely as though they were furniture with heartbeats. He was watching and he was cataloging and he was already making decisions about the Iron Maw Pack that Alpha Cain would not enjoy. But mostly he was waiting. His wolf knew she was close. He could smell her, even through the overwhelming sense of roasted meat and wood smoke, and 100 wolves packed into one room. He could smell her. She smelled like cold water and pine needles and something underneath, something sweet and clean, like the first snow of winter before anyone has walked through it. His wolf was pressing against the inside of his skin, trying to get out, trying to get to her. Kale gripped the arms of his chair until the wood groaned. Then the kitchen door opened, and she walked in. She was carrying a wooden tray of bread, the heavy dark rye that the Iron Maw Pack favored. The sackcloth apron Priscilla had given her covered most of her body, but it could not cover her face, and Kale saw the fresh bruise blooming on her left cheek directly over the scar, red and swollen and obviously new. His wolf went berserk. The animal inside him lunged against its cage with a force that nearly knocked Kale out of his chair. A snarl tore up his throat and he had to clamp his jaw shut so hard his teeth cracked. His eyes flashed black, fully black, the pupils expanding to swallow the iris, and Ronan, sitting beside him, went perfectly still. "My king," Ronan murmured, barely moving his lips. "Your eyes." Kale blinked. He forced the shift back down. It took every ounce of control he possessed. "Who hit her?" he asked, and his voice was so low it was barely human. Ronan did not ask who he meant. "I will find out." Elara moved through the hall like a ghost. She kept her head down. She placed bread on tables without making eye contact. She was so practiced at being invisible that most wolves did not even register her presence, just the appearance of bread where bread had not been before. She reached the head table. She set the bread down between Alpha Cain and the empty chair where the Alpha King's beta had been sitting. She did not look up. She was not supposed to look up. Omegas did not make eye contact with ranked wolves, especially not the Alpha King. But something pulled at her. Something warm and strange and utterly unfamiliar, like a hand reaching into her chest and tugging gently at a string she did not know existed. It was the strangest sensation she had ever felt, a kind of gravity, a kind of hunger, a kind of recognition that made no sense because she had never seen the Alpha King in her life. She looked up. He was already looking at her. Their eyes met. The world stopped. The noise of the feast, the clatter of plates, the roar of conversation, all of it fell away as though someone had pressed a hand over the ears of the universe. There was only his face, those black eyes, the hard line of his jaw, the absolute devastating stillness of a predator who has found what he has been hunting. Alara felt something crack open inside her chest. Not pain, something bigger than pain. Something that felt like a door slamming open in a room she did not know she had, flooding it with light and warmth and a terror so profound it stopped her breath. She dropped the tray. The crash of wood and bread on stone broke the spell. Every head in the hall turned toward her. There was a moment of absolute silence, and then Marin's voice cut through it like a blade. "Alara, you clumsy, useless girl, pick that up immediately." Alara dropped to her knees. Her hands were shaking. She was gathering bread off the floor, her face burning, the bruise on her cheek throbbing in time with her heartbeat. She could feel every eye in the room on her, and she wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. She wanted to be anywhere but here, on her knees, in a sackcloth apron with breadcrumbs in her hair, in front of the Alpha King. "I apologize," she whispered. "I am sorry. I am sorry. Leave it." The voice came from above her. It was deep and calm and carried an authority so absolute that Alara's hands stopped moving on their own. Every wolf in the hall felt it, that voice, because it was not just a voice. It was a command, the kind of command that the body obeys before the mind can process it. She looked up again. The Alpha King had risen from his chair. He was standing at the edge of the table, looking down at her, and his face was no longer the carved stone mask she had glimpsed a moment ago. There was something in his eyes, something raw and uncontrolled, something that looked like fury and gentleness tangled together so tightly they could not be separated. "Stand up," he said. Alara stood. Her legs were trembling. She could not understand why his voice made her feel safe when everything about this situation should have terrified her. Kale looked at her. He looked at the scar. He looked at the fresh bruise. He looked at the sackcloth apron that someone had dressed her in like a punishment. He looked at her hands, red and raw from washing, with the knuckles split from the cold. Then he did something that would be discussed in the Iron Maw Pack for the next 100 years. He took off his coat, the black coat tailored, worth more than most wolves earned in a decade. He stepped around the table and he placed it over her shoulders. The hall went silent. Not the silence of surprise, the silence of incomprehension. Wolves looked at each other. Mouths opened and closed. Alpha Cain sat frozen with a piece of meat halfway to his lips. Priscilla's face was the color of old ash. "My king," Cain began, half rising. "That Omega is just a kitchen servant. She has no wolf. She is not." "Be quiet." Cain sat down so fast, his chair scraped back on the stone floor. Kale had not raised his voice. He had not needed to. The command was woven into the words themselves. Alpha authority, so dense it was nearly visible, pressing down on every wolf in the room like a physical weight. He turned back to Alara. His coat was enormous on her. It smelled like pine forests and winter storms and something warm underneath, something that made her wolf, the wolf she did not have, the wolf she had never shifted into, stir somewhere deep inside her for the first time in her life. She gasped. Her hand flew to her chest. Something was moving inside her. Something that had been sleeping since the day she was born. Something that felt like a heartbeat that was not her own, buried so deep she had never known it was there. Kale saw the moment it happened. He saw her eyes widen. He saw her hand press against her sternum. He saw the flicker of gold, just a flicker, pass through her irises and disappear. His wolf roared in triumph. "What is your name?" he asked. He already knew her name. He wanted to hear her say it. "Alara," she whispered. "Alara Voss." Alara. He said it like he was tasting the word, like he was memorizing the shape of it for later. "Who struck you?" The question landed in the silent hall like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples spread outward. Wolves shifted in their seats. Marin had gone very pale. Priscilla had not moved at all. But her hands, hidden beneath the table, were gripping her gown so tightly the fabric was twisting. Alara said nothing. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room. She could feel Priscilla's gaze burning into the side of her head. She knew what would happen if she answered. She knew what would happen to her after the Alpha King left, and the doors closed and the pack was alone again with its cruelties. "No one," she said. Kale studied her face for a long moment. He did not push. He did not need to. He had already decided to tear this pack apart from the inside, and he had patience that his enemies always underestimated. "Return to the kitchen," he said, his voice gentler than anyone in the room had ever heard from him. "And keep the coat." Alara fled. She walked, technically, but it was the controlled walk of someone who wanted to run. She pushed through the kitchen door and leaned against the wall on the other side and pressed her hands over her mouth to keep the sound inside her from escaping. She was shaking, not from cold, not from fear, from whatever had happened when she looked into the Alpha King's eyes and felt the entire foundation of her existence shift sideways like a building knocked off its frame. In the great hall, Kale sat back down. He picked up his glass. He drank. His face was once again the mask of stone. But beneath the table, his hand was pressed flat against his thigh, and his wolf was pacing with a possessive energy that bordered on madness. Ronan leaned close. It was the stepmother, Priscilla. She struck Alara before the feast. One of the kitchen omegas saw it. Kale said nothing. And there is something else. The pack records were falsified. Alara's father was not just the Gamma. He was the original Alpha heir before Cain challenged and won the position. Alara has Alpha bloodline. Her wolf is not absent. It was suppressed. Kale turned his head slowly. Suppressed. There is an herb. Wolfsbane root, ground fine and mixed into food over years. It puts the wolf into a dormant state. Eventually, the wolf cannot be roused at all. The omega appears wolfless. How long? If she has been ingesting it since her father's death, 3 years. Possibly longer. The glass in Kale's hand cracked. The wine ran over his fingers like blood. He set the broken glass down with a precision that made Ronan's wolf press its belly to the floor in instinctive submission. "Find out who has been putting it in her food," Kale said, "and prepare the judgment chamber." 2 days passed. The inspection continued. Kale was meticulous, thorough, terrifying in his efficiency. He reviewed pack records, questioned warriors, inspected the borders, evaluated the training grounds. Alpha Cain followed him everywhere with the anxious energy of a man who was beginning to realize that this was not a routine inspection. Krael said nothing about Alara. He did not seek her out. He did not mention her name. He was doing something far more dangerous than pursuing her. He was waiting, building his case, constructing a trap so complete that when it closed, there would be no escape for anyone who had harmed her. But at night, his wolf would not let him rest. Every night, Kale shifted and ran through the forest surrounding the Arma Pack territory. He told himself it was reconnaissance. It was not. It was the only way he could stay close to her without terrifying her. In wolf form, he could circle the shed where she slept and listen to her breathing through the thin walls. He could stand guard in the shadows while the temperature dropped to levels that should not be survivable for someone without a wolf to warm them. On the second night, he heard her leave the shed. She was going to the rogue wolf again. He followed at a distance, keeping downwind, moving through the trees with the absolute silence of a predator who had spent decades perfecting the art of not being detected. He watched her enter the cave. He heard her voice, that soft, careful voice, speaking to the animal inside. "You are looking better today. Can you stand? Try for me. Come on!" He heard the rogue wolf whimper, then the scrabble of paws on stone, then Alara's quiet laugh, a sound so unexpected and so purely joyful that it hit Kale like a physical blow to the chest. "There you go. You see? You are stronger than you think." Kale pressed his back against a tree and closed his eyes. His wolf was making that sound again, the grief sound, the recognition sound. He was standing in the dark, in the cold, completely undone by a girl who had nothing and gave everything. He had to tell her about the bond. He had to tell her that he was her mate. He had to tell her that her wolf was not dead, only sleeping, and that someone in her pack had been poisoning her for years to keep it that way. But telling her now before he had dismantled the structures that had trapped her would put her in more danger. Priscilla and Cain would move against her the moment they understood what she was to the Alpha King. And Kale had learned, from the murder of his first mate, that enemies do not need much time to kill the thing you love. They only need a moment when you are not watching. So he waited, and it was the hardest thing he had ever done. On the third day, Priscilla made her move. Alara was in the kitchen when Marin came to her with a cup of tea. This was unusual. Marin never brought tea to anyone. Marin stood over people and made them bring tea to her. "You look pale," Marin said. Her voice was strangely flat. "Drink this." Alara took the cup. The tea smelled wrong. Not bad, exactly, but layered, as though something had been mixed into it that did not belong. She had been drinking tea in this kitchen for 3 years without questioning it. But something had changed inside her since the feast. Since the moment she had looked into the Alpha King's eyes and felt the stirring in her chest. Her senses were sharper, the colors in the room were brighter, the sounds were crisper, and this tea smelled like something her body did not want. She lifted the cup to her lips and pretended to drink. When Marin turned away, she poured it into the wash basin. That evening, Priscilla hosted a gathering in her private quarters for the female wolves of the pack. It was ostensibly a social event, tea and gossip and the careful social warfare that pack women engaged in as a matter of course. But there was a guest, a woman named Celine, tall and stunning, with auburn hair and a body that moved like water. She was from the Silver Ridge pack, and she had traveled 3 days to be here. Celine was Sarah's cousin. Priscilla told the gathered women, her voice carrying the delicate tone of someone delivering information while pretending to share a confidence. She has been close to the Alpha King for years. Everyone expected them to bond after Sarah's death. "It is only a matter of time," the room murmured. Alara was not in the room. She was not invited, of course. But she was in the hallway outside, on her knees, scrubbing the floor because Maren had assigned her to clean the corridor at exactly this time, outside this exact room, with the door left slightly open. Alara heard every word. "Celine is beautiful, is she not?" one of the women said. "She is perfect for him. Strong bloodline. Powerful wolf. And she can actually give him an air unlike some creatures in this pack." Laughter. Light, casual, devastating. Alara scrubbed the floor. Her hands moved in circles, mechanical and steady. She did not feel the tears on her face until they dripped off her chin and landed on the stone. She did not know why she was crying. She had no claim to the Alpha King. He had given her his coat. That was kindness, not commitment. She was a wolfless Omega, with a scar on her face and nothing to offer. Celine was a ranked she-wolf with alpha blood and a direct connection to the king's dead mate. The mathematics were simple, the outcome was obvious. She stood up. She picked up her bucket. She walked away. Halfway down the corridor, she found little Nessa standing in a doorway with wide, frightened eyes. The child was holding something. A small cloth doll. Filthy and missing one arm. That was the only toy she owned. "Are you crying, Alara?" Alara wiped her face quickly. "No, sweetheart, just tired." Nessa looked at her with the particular intensity of children who have grown up in hard places and learned to read faces the way other children learn to read books. She held out the doll. "Rosie makes me feel better when I am sad. You can hold her." Alara knelt down and took the doll. She held it against her chest and looked at the little girl and felt her heart break clean in two. Not for herself, but for this child, growing up in a pack that treated its weakest members like inconveniences to be managed rather than people to be loved. "Thank you, Nessa." "Alara? Why does the big man keep looking at you?" Alara blinked. "What big man?" "The one with the dark eyes." "The king. He watches you all the time. I see him from the window. He watches when you cross the yard and when you go to the kitchens and when you walk to your shed at night. He always watches." Alara's heart stuttered. "You must be mistaken, sweetheart." "I am not mistaken. I have very good eyes. Mama always said so." Nessa paused. Then, with the devastating simplicity of a 9-year-old, she added, "He looks at you the way my mama used to look at me." Alara did not know what to do with that information. She pressed Nessa's doll against the child's chest, kissed the top of her head, and went back to work. But her hands were shaking again. And the thing in her chest, the thing that had stirred to life in the great hall, was moving again, pressing against the inside of her rib cage like something trying to wake up. The next day, everything fell apart. Alara went to the cave at dawn to check on the rogue wolf. She brought food she had saved from her own meager portion: a crust of bread, a withered apple, a handful of dried meat. The rogue wolf was standing when she arrived. He was thinner than before, but his eyes were clear and his leg, while still healing, bore his weight. She smiled when she saw him. The same smile, the one that crinkled the scar, the one that Cale Blackthorn had seen on the first morning and could not stop seeing every time he closed his eyes. "Look at you," she said softly. "You are going to make it." The rogue wolf limped toward her and pressed his nose into her palm. She laughed again, that quiet, golden laugh, and knelt to wrap a fresh strip of cloth around his leg. She did not hear them coming. 4 wolves in human form, armed with chains and silver-tipped staffs. Cain's enforcers. They came through the trees in a semicircle, cutting off every escape route with the practiced efficiency of wolves who hunted down runaways for sport. Alara stood slowly. "There she is," the lead enforcer said. His name was Decker, a thick-necked warrior with flat eyes and a reputation for enjoying his work. "Caught you this time, Scarface." "Aiding a rogue. That is exile or death, depending on the alpha's mood." The rogue wolf snarled, putting himself between Alara and the enforcers. It was a brave and hopeless gesture. He was wounded, outnumbered, and they had silver. "Please," Alara said. "He is injured. He is no threat. He needs to be put down, and you need to be taught a lesson you will not forget." Decker swung the chain. It caught the rogue wolf across the muzzle with a crack that sprayed blood across the cave wall. The wolf went down, yelping, and Alara screamed and threw herself over him, covering his body with hers, pressing her face into his fur. "Stop it! He cannot fight. He is helpless. You are going to kill him. Move, Omega, or you catch the next one." Alara did not move. She held the rogue wolf and closed her eyes and braced for the impact of the chain. It never came. The sound that ripped through the forest was not a growl. It was not a snarl. It was something geological, something that came from beneath the earth and above the sky simultaneously. It shook the trees. It shook the ground. It shook the marrow inside the bones of every wolf within a mile radius. Decker dropped the chain. His face went white. The other three enforcers stumbled backward, their wolves howling inside them, pressing them to their knees in instinctive submission to a dominance so overwhelming it was like trying to stand in a hurricane. Kale Blackthorn came through the trees in human form, but there is nothing human about him. His eyes were fully black, the whites gone, replaced by that bottomless dark that swallowed light and reflected nothing. His body was half shifted, muscles distorted beneath his skin, bones rearranging, claws erupting from his fingers. His lips were pulled back from teeth that were too long and too sharp for a human mouth. He was between Alara and the enforcers before anyone saw him move. One moment, he was at the tree line. The next, he was standing over her, his back to her, his body a wall of fury and protective violence that made the air itself taste like ozone. "You will put down your weapons," Kale said. His voice was wrong. It was layered, double-toned, human and wolf speaking simultaneously. "You will kneel, and you will pray to whatever god you worship, that I do not tear you apart where you stand." Decker was on his knees before the last word left Kale's mouth. Not by choice. His wolf had forced him down, the animal inside him surrendering completely to the Alpha King's dominance. The other three were already flat on their stomachs, whimpering. "My king," Decker choked out. "We were under Alpha Kane's orders." The Omega was aiding a row, pack law says. "I know what pack law says. I wrote pack law." Yell took a step toward Decker. Just one step. Decker flinched so hard he bit through his own lip. "And pack law does not permit 4 armed warriors to attack an unarmed Omega and a wounded animal." Alpha Kane said. "Alpha Kane is not here." "I am." Silence. "Leave. Tell Kane I want him in the judgment chamber within the hour. And if any of you look at her again, I will remove your eyes myself." They ran. They scrambled up from the ground and they ran, crashing through the underbrush like panicked deer, and within seconds they were gone. Kale stood still for a moment. His claws retracted slowly. His eyes flickered, black to dark brown to black to dark brown, like a signal trying to tune itself. He was fighting for control and winning, but barely. Then he turned around. Alara was still on the ground, curled around the rogue wolf. Her face was pressed into his fur. She was shaking so hard the tremors were visible from feet away. The rogue wolf was whining softly, licking her hair. Kale knelt down, slowly, the way you kneel beside something fragile that you are terrified of breaking. "Alara," she flinched at his voice. Then she looked up at him. Her eyes were huge and wet, and the bruise on her cheek was a mottled green and purple that made his wolf snarl with renewed fury. "You are safe," he said. His voice was still rough, still layered, but he was pulling it back, forcing it into something gentler. "No one will hurt you." "The wolf," she whispered. "Please, he needs. I will have my healer tend to him. He will live." Her body sagged with relief. The tension went out of her like water from a broken cup, and for a moment Kale thought she was going to collapse. He reached out instinctively, and his hand closed around her upper arm. The contact was electric, literally. A current of heat and recognition and mate bond energy shot through both of them so intensely that Alara gasped and Kale's entire body locked rigid. His wolf surged forward, pressing against his skin, howling mate mate T, mate mean, flam her now. And it took everything, every scrap of discipline he had built over 30 years of being the most controlled wolf on the continent, to keep himself from pulling her into his arms and marking her right there in the cave. Alara stared at the place where his hand gripped her arm. She could feel it. The heat, the pull, the golden thread that ran from her chest to his, vibrating like a plucked string. "What is happening to me?" she whispered. Kale looked at her for a long moment. His jaw worked. His wolf was clawing at the inside of his skull, screaming at him to tell her, to claim her, to end this agony of proximity without possession. "That," he said carefully, "is a conversation I need to have with you. But not here. Not now. First, I need to take care of something." He stood. He held out his hand. She looked at it. This hand that belonged to the most powerful wolf in 7 territories, offered to a wolfless Omega kneeling in the dirt, and she took it. He pulled her to her feet. He did not let go. Ronan, his beta, appeared at the cave entrance. His face was carefully blank, which was the expression he wore when things were about to get very bad for someone who was not him. "Take Alara and the rogue wolf to my quarters. Have the healer waiting. No one speaks to her. No one touches her. No one enters the room until I return. Yes, my king. And Ronan. If anyone tries, kill them." Ronan nodded once, as though the Alpha King had asked him to bring a glass of water. Kael looked at Alara one more time. The coat, his coat, the one he had given her at the feast, she was still wearing it. It was too big and too heavy, and it made her look like a child playing dress-up, and it was the most beautiful thing Tail had ever seen. "I will come back for you," he said. Then he walked into the forest, and the trees seemed to lean away from him as he passed. The judgment chamber of the Ironmaw Pack was a circular room beneath the main hall, built from stone quarried 200 years ago by the Pack's founders. It was cold, and it was bare, and it was designed to be intimidating. A single chair sat on a raised platform at the far end, and Kale Blackthorn sat in it now, and the chair looked more like a throne than anything Kane owned. They brought them all: Kane, Priscilla, Marin, Decker and his enforcers. Celine, who Kale had learned, was not here by coincidence at all, but had been summoned by Priscilla as part of a calculated plan to distract the Alpha King from the Omega she did not want him noticing. Kale let them stand in silence for a full 3 minutes. 3 minutes is an eternity when you are standing before a man who can end your existence with a word. 3 years ago, Kale began, his voice filling the room without rising above a conversational volume. "Gamma Voss of the Ironmaw Pack died under circumstances that your records describe as natural causes. His daughter Alara was stripped of all rank, all property, and all rights. She was classified as a wolfless Omega and assigned to the kitchens." He paused. "And those 3 years she has been beaten, starved, humiliated, and poisoned." The word poisoned landed like a bomb. Priscilla's composure cracked, just a fraction, but Kale saw it. A tiny flinch behind the eyes, a micro-expression as someone who has just been caught. "My investigators recovered samples of wolfsbane root from the kitchen tea stores. The root was ground and mixed into a specific preparation that was served exclusively to Alara Voss every day for 3 years. The effect of wolfsbane root, when administered chronically, is the suppression of the wolf spirit. It does not kill the wolf. It puts it into a state of dormancy so deep that the host appears wolfless, murmurs, whispers, The wolves gathered in the chamber looked at each other with the dawning horror of people who are realizing that a crime has been committed in their midst, and they did not see it. Alara Voss is not wolfless, Kale said. Her wolf was drugged into silence by someone in this pack, someone who wanted to ensure that the daughter of the former alpha heir would never be able to claim her birthright. He stood. The room contracted around him. It was not a physical change. It was the effect of his aura, his dominance, expanding outward until it pressed against the walls and filled every crack and corner. The wolves in the room felt their own wolves cowering, belly to the ground, submitting to a power so vast it made their own feel like candlelight next to the sun. Came. The Iron Maw Alpha was sweating. His red face had gone blotchy. My king, I had no knowledge of any. You challenged and killed a Gamma whose daughter had alpha blood, and then you reclassified her as defective to prevent any future claim to the Iron Maw leadership. That is a violation of Pack Law Section 12, governing the treatment of bloodline heirs. She had no wolf. There was no way to know, because you poisoned it out of her. Kale's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, and the whisper was more terrifying than any shout. Or your mate did, and you looked the other way. Priscilla broke. It was not my idea, she screamed, spinning toward Kane. You told me to handle her. You said she could never find out what she was. You said if her wolf woke up, the pack would choose her over you because of her father's blood. Kane's face went from blotchy to white. Priscilla, shut your mouth. You shut your mouth. You killed her father. You told everyone it was a fair challenge, but you poisoned his wine before the fight. You killed him the same way you tried to kill his daughter, slowly, quietly, like a coward. The chamber erupted. Warriors shouted. Wolves snarled. Kane lunged toward Priscilla, and two of Kale's warriors intercepted him, slamming him to the ground with a force that cracked a stone beneath his body. Kale watched it all with the patience of a man who has set a fire and is waiting for it to burn. Priscilla Voss, he said, and his voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. The room went instantly silent. You are responsible for the chronic poisoning of an alpha bloodline heir. You are responsible for the physical abuse of a pack member under your care. You are responsible for the theft of property and rank belonging to Alara Voss. Priscilla was crying now. The beautiful facade had crumbled. Beneath it was something small and desperate and ugly. Kane of the Iron Maw Pack, you are responsible for the unlawful killing of Gamma Voss. You are responsible for the conspiracy to suppress a bloodline heir. You are responsible for 3 years of systematic abuse and corruption within your pack. He looked at them both. I strip you of your ranks. I strip you of your territories. I strip you of your wolves. The room gasped. Stripping a wolf was the ultimate punishment. It was a thing of legends, a power that only the Alpha King possessed, the ability to sever the bond between a shifter and their animal spirit permanently. It left the person alive but hollow, unable to shift, unable to feel the connection that defined their entire existence. It was considered worse than death. He screamed. He fought against the warriors holding him, thrashing and snarling, but it was already happening. Kale's dominance reached into him like a hand closing around the wolf inside his chest and pulling. Kane's eyes bulged, his body arched. A sound came out of him that was not human and not animal, but something in between, something broken. And when it was over, he collapsed to the ground, limp and empty, with eyes that were suddenly, horrifyingly ordinary. Priscilla did not fight. She simply crumpled, folding in on herself like a building with its foundation removed, and when Kel pulled her wolf from her, she made no sound at all. The emerald necklace, Alara's mother's necklace, slipped from her throat and clattered to the floor. Mirren, the head Omega, looked up. She was shaking so badly her teeth were chattering. You administered the wolfsbane tea. You knew what it was. You did it willingly. I was ordered. I had no choice. You had a choice. You chose obedience over mercy. I do not strip your wolf. But you are banished from the Iron Maw Pack, effective immediately. If you are found within these borders after sundown, you will be treated as a rogue. Morin fled. Kale picked up the emerald necklace from the floor. He held it in his palm and looked at it for a long moment. The stones caught the torchlight and threw green sparks across his skin. Then he walked out of the judgment chamber, through the pack house, up the stairs, down the corridor, and stopped outside the door to his quarters. He could hear her on the other side. He could hear her heartbeat, faster than normal, anxious. He could hear the rogue wolf's breathing, steadier now after the healer's work. And he could hear something else, something small and soft and impossible. He could hear her wolf. It was faint, like a heartbeat buried under layers of cotton, like a voice calling from the bottom of a deep well. But it was there. The wolfsbane was wearing off. Without the daily dose, the wolf was beginning to stir, to push toward the surface, to fight its way back to consciousness after 3 years of chemically induced sleep. Cal opened the door. Alara was sitting on the edge of his bed. She had not intended to sit on the bed. She had been sitting in the chair by the window, but the rogue wolf had climbed onto the bed, despite the healer's protests, and Alara had moved to sit beside him because he whined when she was too far away. She looked up when Kale entered. His coat was still around her shoulders. Her hair was a mess. The bruise on her cheek was livid. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and the realization hit him with a force that nearly drove him to his knees. "The rogue wolf," she said immediately. "Your healer said he will be okay. His leg is mending. He needs rest, but Alara." She stopped. His voice was different now. The layers were gone. The command was gone. This was just a man's voice, stripped bare, vulnerable in a way that the Alpha King had not been vulnerable in front of another living being in 3 years. "There are things I need to tell you." He sat down across from her in the chair she had vacated. He put his elbows on his knees and looked at his hands, the hands that had just stripped 2 wolves of their animals, the hands that shook the first time they smelled pine needles in winter air on a girl in a torn dress. "Your father was murdered. Cain poisoned him before their challenge fight. It was not a fair death. It was assassination." Alara made a sound. A small, choked sound, like something being pressed out of a space too small to hold it. Her hands gripped the edge of the bed until her knuckles went white. "Your stepmother has been putting wolfsbane root in your tea for 3 years. It suppressed your wolf. You are not wolfless, Alara. You have never been wolfless. Your wolf has been asleep." The tears came. They slid down her face in silence because Alara had learned to cry without sound, the way she had learned everything, alone in the dark, where no one could use it against her. Cain and Priscilla have been stripped of their wolves and their rank. Marin has been banished. The Iron Maw Pack is under my direct authority until a new alpha is appointed. He reached into his coat pocket, the coat of his uniform, not the one around her shoulders, and pulled out the emerald necklace. He held it out to her. "This was your mother's." Alara's hand shook so badly she almost could not take it. She pressed the necklace against her chest and doubled over, and the sound that came out of her then was not silent at all. It was a keen, a low, wrenching sound of grief and relief. So intertwined they had become the same thing, and Kale's wolf howled inside him in response. He moved. He did not decide to move. His body simply rose from the chair and crossed the space between them and sat beside her on the bed. He did not touch her. He sat close enough that she could feel his warmth, close enough that if she leaned, she would find something solid to lean against. She leaned. Her head dropped against his shoulder. Her body trembled against his side, and Kale Blackthorn, the alpha king of the 7 packs, the most feared wolf on the continent, sat perfectly still and let her cry on him, and felt the golden thread between them tighten until it hummed like a living thing. When she was quiet, when the trembling had subsided, he spoke the last thing. "There is one more thing." She lifted her head. Her eyes were red and swollen, and they were the most honest eyes he had ever looked into. "You are my mate." Silence. "The bond activated the first morning I arrived, when I saw you by the river. My wolf recognized you. It has not been silent since." "That is impossible," Alara whispered. "I have no wolf. Even if what you say about the wolfsbane is true, my wolf has been dormant for years. Mates need both wolves to form a bond. Your wolf does not need to be awake for the bond to exist. It only needs to exist, and yours does. I can feel it, Alara. Right now, I can feel it reaching for mine." Her hand went to her chest again. The stirring, the pressure behind her rib cage, the heartbeat that was not her own. "I felt it," she whispered, "at the feast. When I looked at you. Yes, I thought I was losing my mind. You were finding it." She looked at him with something that might have been hope, but was too scared to call itself by name. "You lost your mate, Sierra. Everyone knows what happened to her. You swore you would never bond again." Kale's jaw tightened. The old wound, the one he had cauterized with duty and discipline, and the kind of cold efficiency that made people think he had no heart left. But Sarah's memory was not a wound anymore. It was a scar, healed over, part of him, always part of him, but no longer bleeding. "I swore that 3 years ago," he said, "before I watched a girl with nothing kneel in the ice to save a dying wolf, before I watched her feed an animal with her own hands when she had not eaten herself, before I watched her take a blow to the face and refuse to name her abuser to protect herself." He paused. "Sierra would have liked you. She would have told me I was an idiot for waiting this long to speak." Something cracked in Alara's face. Not the careful blankness, not the survival mask. Something underneath all of that. Something tender and terrified and reaching out with both hands. "I do not know how to be anyone's mate," she said. "I do not know how to be anything but what they made me. I have been the wolfless Omega, the Scarface, the kitchen girl for so long that I do not remember who I was before. Then we will find out together." He said it simply. No grand declarations. No possessive claims. Just a quiet offer, made in a quiet room between two people who had been broken by loss and were deciding, carefully, cautiously, to see if the pieces might fit together. The rogue wolf lifted his head from the bed and rested it on Alara's lap. She stroked his fur absently, and Kale felt something he had not felt in 3 years. Jealousy. Actual jealousy. Of a half-dead rogue wolf getting his mate's attention. His wolf grumbled. Alara almost smiled. "He trusts you. He has good instincts. He was thrown away too, you know. Like me. Rogues do not choose to be rogues. They are made into rogues by packs that do not want them." Kale looked at the rogue wolf for a long moment. Then he said, "He can stay." The rogue wolf huffed as though he had already decided this himself. In the days that followed, the Iron Maw pack transformed. Kale did not leave. He had intended to stay for a 3-day inspection. He stayed for 3 weeks. He dismantled the corruption in the pack hierarchy with surgical precision. He appointed new leadership. He opened the pack kitchens to all wolves equally. He tore down the servants' quarters and had new housing built. He personally oversaw the integration of Omegas into the pack's decision-making council, a radical change that would ripple outward to the 7 packs for generations. And he watched Alara come back to life. It happened slowly. The the way spring happens, not all at once but in small daily increments that you only noticed when you looked back. The wolfsbane cleared her system within a week. On the 8th day without the drug, Alara woke before dawn and felt her wolf press against the inside of her mind for the first time. She sobbed. It was like hearing a voice she had forgotten, like opening a door to a room in her own house that she had been told did not exist. Her wolf was there, groggy and weak and furious, 3 years of suppressed emotion flooding through the bond in a torrent that knocked Alara to her knees. Her wolf was female. She was white. She was enormous, far larger than an Omega wolf should have been, which confirmed what Ronan's investigation had already proven, that Alara carried alpha bloodline through her father. She did not shift that day, or the next. The wolf needed time to rebuild its strength, to forge new pathways through a body that had been chemically severed from it for 3 years. But Alara could feel it now, a constant presence, warm and watchful, like a hand resting on her shoulder. The first thing her wolf said to her was one word, mate. The second thing her wolf said was another word, ours, and it was not talking about the rogue wolf. Celine left the Iron Maw pack on the 4th day, without fanfare and without the prize she had come to collect. She had tried once to approach Cale at dinner, placing her hand on his arm and leaning close with a smile that had been practiced in mirrors. Cale had looked at her hand on his arm, then looked at her face and said, "Remove your hand or I will remove your arm," in a tone so flat and sincere that Celine was packed and gone by morning. The pack gossip shifted overnight. The ranked wolves, who had spent years ignoring Alara, now watched her with a mixture of curiosity and nervous deference. The Magas, freed from Marin's tyranny, began to approach her with small gestures of solidarity, a shared meal, a borrowed blanket, a tentative smile. Nessa attached herself to Alara like a small, determined shadow. The child appeared at her side every morning and stayed until evening, chattering about everything and nothing, asking questions that ranged from the philosophical to the absurd. Why do birds sing at morning instead of night? Do you think the moon gets lonely? Is the Alpha King going to be your mate because his wolf talks to your wolf? Because I can tell, because his eyes go soft when he looks at you and his eyes never go soft. Alara had no answer for that last one. Or rather, she had an answer, but it lived in a part of her that was still too scared to speak. Kale courted her the way a wolf courts. Not with words or gifts or grand gestures. With presence, with proximity, with the quiet, consistent reassurance of being there. Always there, a solid wall between her and anything that might cause her pain. He walked with her in the mornings. He sat with her at meals, publicly, at the head table, where the entire pack could see the Alpha King choosing to eat beside the Omega they had called Scarface. He brought her tea, real tea, checked by his own healer, and he placed it in her hands each morning with a care that made the wolves around them fall silent. He told her about Sarah, not all at once. In pieces, the way you share a wound. He told her about the night Sarah died and how he had held her and how the sound she made at the end, a small, surprised sound, like she had not expected death to feel the way it felt, had followed him into his sleep every night for 3 years. Alara listened. She did not try to fix it or compare it to her own pain. She simply listened, and when he was finished, she placed her hand on top of his, and the warmth of the bond flowed between them like a river finding its course. "You do not have to let go of her to let me in," Alara said. It was the first time Cale Blackthorn cried in front of another person since Sarah's death. It was not dramatic. His eyes filled, and one tear traced a line down his jaw, and he turned his face away, and Alara pretended not to see, and they sat together in a silence that held more love than most people put into words. On the 19th day, Alara shifted. It happened at twilight in the clearing behind the pack house, with Kale and Nessa and Ronan and the rogue wolf watching. Alara stood in the center of the clearing in bare feet, the grass cold between her toes, the sky above her streaked with orange and purple, and she closed her eyes and called to the wolf inside her. The wolf answered. The shift was not smooth. 3 years of dormancy had made the transformation painful, and Alara screamed once, a raw, tearing sound as her bones rearranged and her skin split and reformed. Kale took a step forward, every instinct in his body driving him to stop her pain. But Ronan caught his arm. She needs to do this, Ronan said quietly. Kale forced himself to stand still. It was harder than any battle he had ever fought. When it was over, a wolf stood in the clearing. A white wolf, massive, easily twice the size of a normal omega, with silver markings on her face that traced the exact path of the scar she carried in human form. Her eyes were gold, pure molten gold. Nessa screamed with delight. She is beautiful. Alara, you are beautiful. The white wolf looked at the child and made a soft huffing sound that was unmistakably a laugh. Then she turned her head and looked at Kay. His wolf exploded out of him. The shift was instantaneous, faster than anyone had ever seen the Alpha King change. And suddenly there was a black wolf in the clearing, enormous, midnight dark, with eyes that burned like coals. The black wolf was shaking. His entire body was vibrating with the force of the bond snapping fully into place. Both wolves awake, both wolves present, both wolves recognizing each other across the distance of years and pain and loss. The white wolf took a step toward him. The black wolf took a step toward her. They met in the center of the clearing and pressed their foreheads together, and the sound that came from both of them, a low harmonic hum that was neither growl nor whimper but something entirely new, made every wolf within earshot bow their heads in instinctive reverence. The meat bond locked into place with an audible click that resonated through the territory like a bell being struck. Wolves throughout the pack felt it. Some gasped, some wept, some fell to their knees. It was a bond unlike anything any of them had ever witnessed, not just because it was between the Alpha King and an Omega, but because the power of it, the sheer radiant force of two wolves who had been broken apart finding each other at last, was overwhelming. The white wolf licked the black wolf's muzzle. The black wolf pressed his nose into her neck and breathed her in pine needles and winter air and the clean, sweet scent that had driven him mad since the first morning by the river. The rogue wolf, sitting at the edge of the clearing, threw back his head and howled. It was a rough, ragged howl, broken by his injuries, but it carried pure joy. Nessa howled along with him in the enthusiastic and entirely tuneless way of human children, and Ronan, the stoic beta who had seen everything and reacted to nothing, turned his face away and pressed his knuckles against his mouth. They shifted back at the same time. Human again, standing in the center of the clearing, and Kale caught Alara because her legs buckled from the effort of the first shift, and he held her against his chest, with one arm around her waist and the other cradling the back of her head, and she pressed her face into the hollow of his throat and breathed him in the same way his wolf had breathed her in. "I have you," he said. His voice cracked on the words. The Alpha King's voice cracked. "I have you, and I will never let go. Promise me," she whispered against his skin. "I promise. Promise me again. I promise. Every day. For the rest of our lives. I promise." The claiming ceremony took place 3 days later, at the full moon, before the entire Ironmaw pack and delegations from all 7 territories. It was the largest gathering of wolves in living memory. They came because it was the Alpha King's mating ceremony, yes, but they also came because word had spread. The story of the wolfless Omega who was not wolfless. The girl who had been poisoned and beaten and stripped of everything and still knelt in the ice to save a dying rogue. The girl who smiled at broken things and gave away the only warmth she had. They came because it was a story that made their wolves howl with something they could not name. The ceremony was held in the clearing. Torches lined the perimeter. The moon hung full and heavy and silver above the trees, casting a light that turned the frost on the grass to diamonds. Alara stood at the center in a dress of white that she had not chosen, that Nessa and the pack Omegas had chosen for her, arguing and debating and holding fabric up to her face for 2 days until they found the one that made her scar look like what it was. Not a disfigurement, but a map of survival. A story written in skin, proof that she had endured. Kale stood across from her in black. His face was not stone tonight. It was open in a way that made the wolves watching hold their breath because they had never seen the Alpha King look at anything the way he was looking at this girl. The ceremony in wolf tradition is simple. There are words, but the words are not the important part. The important part is the mark. The Alpha bites the Omega at the junction of neck and shoulder, leaving a permanent scar that proclaims the bond to every wolf who sees it. The Omega, if willing, bites back. It is mutual. It is permanent. It is everything. Kale spoke first, but he did not speak to the crowd. He spoke only to her. I came to this pack to conduct an inspection. I did not come looking for you. I was not looking for anything. I had closed that door. I had locked it. I had thrown away the key and convinced myself that the room behind it was empty. He paused. You kicked the door down. Laughter from the crowd. Soft, warm laughter. You smiled at a dying wolf, and my own wolf woke up from a sleep I thought was permanent. You fed a creature the world threw away, and I understood that everything I believed about myself was wrong. I was not strong because I survived alone. I was surviving alone because I was not strong enough to let someone in. His voice dropped. You let me in, Alara Voss. You let me in when you had every reason to keep every door locked forever. And I swear to you before this pack and every wolf under my authority that I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that trust. Alara was crying. She was crying openly, without shame, without hiding. And it was the first time the Iron Maw pack had ever seen her cry, and it changed something in them. Wolves who had looked through her for years saw her for the first time. Wolves who had called her Scarface felt the word turn to ash in their mouths. I do not have a speech, Alara said. Her voice was unsteady but clear. I have spent 3 years learning to be silent, learning to be invisible, learning to need nothing and expect nothing and want nothing because wanting things when you have nothing is the most dangerous thing in the world. She looked at him, gold eyes to black eyes. You gave me your coat when I was cold. That was the first time in 3 years that anyone gave me anything. I did not know what to do with it. I did not know how to be someone who receives things. She reached up and touched the scar on her face. Her fingers traced it from temple to jaw, the same path they had traveled 10,000 times. I am learning that the scar does not make me less, that the silence does not make me invisible, that the wolf inside me was always there even when the world told me it was not. She took his hand. You asked me to be your mate. I say yes, not because you are the Alpha King, not because you are powerful or feared or because you gave me a coat. I say yes because you knelt beside me in a cave and asked my name in a voice that sounded like coming home. The mark was given and received beneath the full moon, and the bond that snapped into place between them sent a shockwave through every wolf present. It was visible, almost a shimmer in the air between their bodies, a heat distortion that smelled like pine and winter, and the particular electricity that comes just before a storm breaks. Kale marked her. His teeth sank into the soft skin at the junction of her neck and shoulder, and Ilara gasped and her hands gripped his arms and her wolf howled inside her. And the pain was not pain. It was completion. It was a key turning in a lock. It was the sound of a door opening in a room that she had been told did not exist. And then Ilara marked him. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf on the continent, tilted his head and bared his throat to an omega, and the crowd went utterly silent because an alpha baring his throat is an act of surrender so profound it reshapes the power dynamic of the entire ceremony. It is the alpha saying, not just I claim you, but I am yours, equally, completely. Her teeth broke his skin, and Kale made a sound that the wolves nearest to them would remember for the rest of their lives, a low, shattered sound that was half pain and half relief, and all surrender. The clearing erupted, howls from every direction, every wolf present lifting their voice to the moon in celebration of a bond that should not have been possible. An Omega who was drugged into silence, an Alpha who had locked his heart in a tomb, a rogue wolf who howled along from the edge of the clearing, flanked by a 9-year-old girl who screamed, "I knew it! I told you he watched you!" at the top of her lungs. In the weeks and months that followed, the world Ilara knew was unmade and rebuilt around her. She was Luna, not in name only but in practice, authority, and respect. The 7 packs, initially uncertain about an Omega Luna, a formerly wolfless Omega at that, came around quickly because Ilara governed the way she lived, with quiet strength, with compassion that did not compromise, with a particular kind of authority that comes not from dominance but from having survived the very worst and choosing kindness anyway. She reformed the Omega laws across all 7 territories. She established shelters for rogues, real shelters with healers and food and the possibility of reintegration into packs. The rogue wolf she had saved in the cave was the first to be formally accepted into the Iron Maw pack, and he shifted into human form for the first time in over a year on the day of his induction, a thin, scarred man with yellow eyes who knelt before Ilara and said, "You saved my life with bread and a strip of cloth. I owe you a debt I can never repay." Ilara placed her hand on his head and said, "You owe me nothing. You taught me that kindness is never wasted." Nessa was formally adopted into the Alpha King's household because Ilara refused to become Luna without ensuring that the child who had offered her a one-armed doll in a dark hallway would never be cold or hungry or afraid again. Nessa thrived. She grew into a fierce, bright, opinionated girl who followed Ilara everywhere and argued with Ronan about strategy and called the Alpha King Kale to his face, a liberty that no other living wolf would dare take. Kale let her. He let her because every time the child said his name, Ilara smiled, and that smile, the one that crinkled the scar, the one he had first seen by the river on a frozen morning that changed everything, was worth more to him than every crown and territory he possessed. 3 months after the claiming ceremony, Ilara woke before dawn with a feeling she could not name. She lay in the dark, in the bed she shared with the Alpha King in a room that was warm and safe, and hers, and she pressed her hand to her stomach. Her wolf stirred, not with the usual lazy contentment of mourning, with something else, something new, something that felt like a second heartbeat, tiny and rapid, beginning to beat in time with her own. She sat up. Kale woke instantly, the way he always did when she moved, his wolf tuned to her frequency with an attentiveness that never faded. "Ilara, what is wrong?" She took his hand and placed it flat against her stomach. His wolf howled, not the mate howl, not the grief howl, something he had never made before, a sound of pure, staggering, overwhelmed joy. His eyes went wide, then wet. "Ilara, yes, you are. Yes, he pulled her into his arms with a gentleness that seemed impossible from a man his size, and held her so tightly and so carefully at the same time that Alara actually laughed, the golden laugh from the cave. "I do not know how to be someone's father," he said against her hair. "We will find out together." He pulled back and looked at her face in the pre-dawn darkness. The scar that ran from temple to jaw, the eyes that were gold now, always gold, her wolf shining through, the mouth that had smiled at a broken thing and brought the Alpha King to his knees. "I love you," he said. It was the first time he had said it in words. The bond had said it 1,000 times. His actions had said it every day. But the words, spoken aloud in the quiet dark, were their own kind of magic. "I love you," she said. "I have loved you since you gave me your coat, and I did not know what to do with being given something." Outside the window, the first light of dawn was touching the tops of the pines. Somewhere in the pack house, Nessa was already awake, already arguing with someone about something. Somewhere in the yard, the rogue wolf, now a ranked member of the pack, was beginning his morning patrol with a dedication that bordered on obsessive. The world was full of broken things. Packs that crushed their weakest. Wolves that were thrown away. Girls who were told they were nothing and believed it because the evidence was overwhelming and the alternative was too terrifying to consider. But the world was also full of moments where a girl smiled at a broken wolf by a river, where an Alpha King watched from the shadows and felt his dead heart take its first breath, where kindness, the smallest, most unremarkable kindness, a strip of cloth, a piece of bread, a one-armed doll, cracked open the universe and let the light flood in. Alara placed her hand over Kale's hand on her stomach. 2 heartbeats, soon to be 3. A family built not from perfection or power, but from the radical, stubborn decision to love each other anyway. To love each other to love each other because. The sun rose over the Ironmaw pack. The Alpha King held his Luna in the warmth of their bed, and somewhere deep in the forest a white wolf howled at the morning sky and a black wolf answered, and the sound they made together was the sound of something that had been waiting a very long time to begin.